Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Ryan.
Have you got a secret that you're wanting to share with everybody? Anything? I know you're willing to give up your time, your precious time, to talk about some science fiction you've already watched, but is there a secret that you want to give away?
Nah, I got something to do.
You're too busy? Guys, I tried to get Rachel to tell a secret, but she slept in. She couldn't join us for this podcast to share secrets. I've got a secret if you want to hear it. If everyone, younglings, sit down. Ryan's got a big secret he's willing to share. I don't think I've ever said this on the pod, but I love the line "Yum Yum" from Star Trek Discovery. It's such a good line of dialogue. So good. And I've been holding that in. Over the years of doing this podcast, I've felt like I haven't really expressed that, and it's been bubbling away in me, and I feel guilty for holding that in. But now I've released it, I feel blessed. I feel free of the burdens of secrecy. And what a ceremony of light and dark that was, Rachel. Are you feeling rejuvenated from hearing that?
No.
No? But do I get a new uniform? I'm telling it because we on the YumYumPodcast, we wear uniforms, Yum uniforms, where they're bright yellow uniforms with a big pink stripe down the middle, and Yum Yum name tags where it says Rachel is the host on one tag, and then on my tag it says Ryan is the host, and we high five when we walk into our recording studio in our Yum Yum outfits. We drove here in the Yummobile, we sit down.
You said that we record at the school.
Yeah, we record at your high school. I didn't say that we weren't doing that. That's the recording studio in your high school's chemistry lab.
You said that we live there.
We live here.
So why do we drive?
Because when the students are at your school, Rachel, I'm not there. Well, you have to come pick me up and bring me back home. I'm working uploading images of Babylon 5 to IMDb because nobody else is uploading the HD images these days, so somebody's got to do it. But enough riff and or raff, Rachel. We're here to talk about Babylon 5 from the rewatch perspective. We are a podcast that does give away the spoilers, so if you have not seen Babylon 5 before, we recommend you give it a watch. And we are not alone for this. We've brought in somebody else. We've brought in a fellow Australian, a fellow podcaster who goes through science fiction television. How about we pass it over to them? Adam, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing spectacular. I am so excited to sink our teeth into the episode of Babylon 5 we've got coming up. But how are you? And could you tell us a bit about yourself and your show?
Yeah, so I'm from the wonderful island of Tasmania, and I'm an author of science fiction books. I'm also a podcaster. I do a show called Nerd Heaven, where I go through various science fiction shows, kind of like you do here. So I've covered some Star Trek Discovery and Picard in the past. I've just finished going through the whole of Stargate Universe, and I'm just launching now into the fan-made series Star Trek Continues.
Oh, Star Trek Continues. I thought you were going to say Stargate Continuum, which is a thing I know exists.
Yes, that is a movie.
Are you going to cover that?
Well, I'd probably have to cover the 10 or so seasons of SG-1 first, because it's actually the last SG-1 content that was ever made.
Oh, okay. See, Stargate is this complex web that I have not revisited since my childhood, so I cannot remember all of the things that bleed into one another. But, yeah, you cover a wide slew of different sci-fi things. You have done Discovery like us. We're doing Discovery. You've done Discovery. And I love listening to your Star Trek content. You did Picard for a bit there. I love listening to that because... obviously,
you love watching and making other people suffer.
Yeah, I love Star Trek Discovery, and I love Babylon 5. I love all these sci-fi things, but you have a really nice approach to how you come at these shows. As you said, you're a sci-fi fan and author, and you look at them from like us, a very analytical lens, but you have a very personable way you go about it, especially with, say, the Discovery content that you did, where you're very polite, but you won't be afraid to kind of call out things that don't quite add up within itself, or even from a sci-fi genre standpoint. I really like how with your Stargate coverage and your Discovery content, you really hammer in on the trappings and the minutiae of the genre that these things are playing with, which is really neat to hear. I'm curious to know, what is your relationship with Babylon 5?
Yeah, so much like Londo, I was there in the beginning. So I watched The Gathering on TV when it was first broadcast in Australia, and I thought, oh yeah, this is all right. And so I kind of watched the first season on and off. It was on about 11 p.m, so I'd stick the tape in the VCR, record it, and then watch it the next morning over breakfast before uni. And at the time, I kind of saw it as a bit of a poor man's Star Trek. But, more Star Trek is always good.
Yeah.
I kind of, I don't know, I dropped the ball somewhere and missed a lot of the second half of Season 1, and then kind of picked it up a bit more in Season 2. And that's when I really started to see how this show was different. And so while I came to Babylon 5 because of its similarities to Star Trek, I stayed because of its differences. And so by the end of Season 2, I was hooked, and so I just watched it religiously from there on, and collected key episodes on VHS, so I could kind of do these partial rewatches where I was missing a lot, but I was hitting the big plot points. So that was a lot of fun. Whenever I'd be in a shop and I'd say, oh, there's a new B5 tape. I don't have that one. I'll better grab that.
To get your first video of Babylon 5, the collector's edition, for only $4.95 plus shipping, have your credit card ready and call toll-free 1-800-339-5353.
Rachel, what are we talking about and looking at today on Babylon 5?
We are looking at the episode Ceremonies of Light and Dark. And the DVD description is: remnants of Nightwatch remain on the station, and they're plotting to take control. As a part of their plan, they kidnapped Delenn and 2 associates, setting a perilous hostage crisis in motion.
One of the people that's kidnapped, the captain of the ship that wants to come visit Babylon 5, is played by Kim Strauss, who is the Drazi that we see often. Especially, we all love him as the green Drazi. And I found it very distracting in this episode to see him with the most humanoid face we've ever seen him with, because it's getting me closer to know what these guys underneath the makeup really look like, and I'm not used to that, because in B5, a lot of those guys like Kim Strauss are always in those makeup, and when you look at their careers elsewhere, they're usually voice actors, so it's even harder to know what they look like. So here, seeing this handsome Minbari captain, I was like, who's this handsome guy? And then it's like, oh, it's the goofy Drazi that we see a lot. Oh, that's nice. That's a fun little piece of business that's happening. If I could go first in history and relationship with this, it's very simple. I like this episode. I've always liked this episode. It's not the greatest. It's a messy episode. It's busy. It has a lot of individual strands happening to it. I don't think it always weaves together in this individual episode. There's a lot of paying things off, a lot of setting things up, but I like it. I find it's even though there's action to it and there's an ominous threat of the Night Watch, when I think about Ceremonies of Light and Dark, there's a fondness there because I think of it as a very sweet episode. And that may be clouded because of the ending sequences of this episode are very tender and very harrowing as well. But that is what I come away with when I look at this. What about yourself, Rachel?
I think it's fairly similar. It's an episode where I kind of forget that everything happens all at once, because there is a lot of stuff that happens and it just keeps on getting thrown at you. But for the most part, it works. But it doesn't feel like a very cohesive episode. So it's not like S tier, but it's a solid episode of B5. And there are some moments that I really cherish that we get in this one.
And it doesn't fumble the ball like a lot of episodes in the previous seasons that follow up the big ones. Like, let's never forget that TKO is after Signs and Portents. Like, there isn't that whiplash effect. This is just, it's a quieter episode after having a series of really high octane ones. What about you, Adam? What's been your journey with this? How did you feel when I said, let's do this episode?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you've both said. There's some really nice emotional moments in this episode. Cohesively, I think, there's a lot going on. This one actually, it does an important job, I think, because, we know that B5 was basically constructed as a 5-year novel for TV. And so I kind of like to look at it in terms of story structure. And there's a concept called the scene sequel format. You have a scene where a character has a goal, there's a conflict that stands in the way of that goal, and then it leads to an outcome, which is usually a negative outcome. We're coming off the big three, which is essentially the midpoint of the entire story.
This is the middle episode of the entire series as well. This is the direct midpoint.
Yeah. So in a story, when you have one of these big scenes, often you'll have what's called a sequel, not to be confused with a movie sequel, where the characters react to what's happened and they reflect and they kind of plan their next move, which kind of leads into the new goal in the next scene. And I think this episode very much is a sequel to the scene, which was the previous 3 episodes. So I think structurally it's actually doing quite an important job.
Yeah, it is. When you look at it in that fashion, that is very much true, because I think about that a lot when it comes to not even whole episodes, but individual moments in episodes do a lot of work without you even thinking about that. I keep going back to just a few episodes ago, we had that conversation with Sheridan and Delenn about the rain hitting the roof, and that scene in itself is doing so much work without you even thinking about it. And yet when we look at Ceremonies of Light and Dark, it is a sequel in the way that you're talking about, but when you're looking at it as face value as an episode that you whack on when you press next on your DVD, this is a bit of a goofy affair at times. You have Garibaldi with an AI that's voiced by Harlan Ellison. You have Londo doing Londo stuff, and yet you also have the ominous follow through on the Night Watch is still a problem.
Yeah.
We still have things we've got to worry about, but there's this air of lightness to it that is needed after having so many big, high energy, emotionally driven episodes, but it isn't compromising like, say, Exogenesis was, where Exogenesis was just too out there and silly and bizarre to really connect with where we were in the momentum of the season.
But that makes a lot of sense to me, because I'm like, oh, that's basically what Delenn says.
In terms of?
So, like, Delenn has that moment where she's like, we need to take this moment and look forward and analyze the present so that we can move forward. And the episode itself is also doing that.
We have gone through so much pain, John. If we do not put it behind us, if we are not born into new possibilities, it will surely destroy us.
We've got a lot of things to catch up on in Ceremonies of Light and Dark. Let's start with Londo, because he's a fun character. We all love Londo, and he has 1 or 2 moments here. And Rachel, how about you walk us through what Londo's having to get up to?
Poisoning! that he's poisoning and being poisonous.
He's a nice guy in this one, huh?
Yeah. So he sits down with Reefer.
Oh, it's a good episode when the credits mention that William Forward as Lord Reefer is going to be in it. You perk up in your seat. You go, oh, okay, something's going to go down because Reefer's that kind of character at the moment where he's a big deal.
And he also comes in with a good amount of big dick energy.
He's a little indignant turd in this. He's like, why have you called me out here? Huh? Don't you know I'm busy?
I don't have to come to you. I'm more important.
He's got a nice outfit now, too. Like, he's very regal looking. His hair is nice and coiffed. His accent work is on point this episode as well. Reefer is in full I am the king of everything mode here.
Yeah.
And
when he just blurts out that, he's gunning for Emperor.
Mm-hmm. Basically.
And then he's like, oh, wait, who's around?
He's a slime ball. But Londo's called Reefer aboard
and
Babylon
Londo
5.
is in control of this situation.
Because he hasn't been. That's the important thing. He's let things slip between the cracks. He even says that in reference to another thing. But he hasn't been in control of things as much as he should. He's let the mess that he's made just keep spreading out, and Reefer is a part of that. So he has to come in and maintain order, and he calls Reefer on the station. He's a little turd about it, but the sentiment that Londo has thematically ties into what Delenn is wanting, and even he points that out, which is going through your past, your present, your future, trying to put things in order, come to terms with things, what we've gone through. And Londo's doing it in a very old school Centauri manner.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, what did you think about the Londo Reefer stuff here? Because it is just one scene in the episode.
Yeah, this is one of those iconic scenes that you always remember, but you don't necessarily remember what episode it was from. And there's so many important things that will come out of this scene. But yeah, I love this scene. Londo is he actually has some really interesting things to say. The way that he's contrasting, I guess, with Reefer. Like, there's this one moment he says, "Your loyalty to your people should be greater than your ambition," which I think is really interesting coming from Londo. He has a lot of ambition, but first and foremost, he's a patriot to his people, and I think that's what separates the two.
Yes.
And I just love when he says about they're going to have a little party in your cardiovascular system. That's such a Londo way of saying it.
Yeah.
And the line delivery, the line delivery, he has such fun with that.
The little head gesture that he does with that.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
It is very good, but there is a definite delineation between Reefer and Londo, yet you can see how Reefer is this dark visage of what Londo could be, because he doesn't have any he doesn't have any moral compass that we can understand. He doesn't have one. He doesn't give a shit. He's there for the sake of being powerful and infamous, and in their Centauri culture, immortal. And Londo, although he has those things within him as well, we've seen that. He is, as you say, he has values of a patriot. Sometimes he forgets that. Sometimes he's blinded by emotions by that. But that's usually a fundamental thing driving him. And that puts us in because Londo's shoes to understand why he does things.
He wants to restore his people.
Mm-hmm.
Reefer wants to install himself in power.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. But you said it well, Adam, which is, this is an iconic scene. This is iconic. The look on Reefer's face when he's told that his drink's been poisoned, that he's been poisoned, just that, what? How could you? And he even says, how could you have done this, Londo? And the great retort of, well, you would have done it to me. Eventually it would have all happened. We love the old ways, but I got here first. And the great acting from William Forward as Reefer, where you see he's pissed off. He's flabbergasted, but there's an acknowledgement like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have.
Me.
But as we're saying, this scene does a lot of work in terms of paying stuff off, because Reefer's been this chaotic agent in the background of the Centauri politics that Londo's just been letting wreak havoc because he's been too busy with his own things. He's been too worried about his own future to really deal with Reefer. But Rachel, what about the stuff that this is building towards in the future? How about that stuff?
Oh, I kept on thinking, well, I'm kind of sad that Londo doesn't get to use the poison.
If there is any.
If there even is any. Because, you know, the situation with Jakar.
Oh, in the Gathering.
Way back when.
He could have used the Sinclair move.
Yeah. But I feel like there was poison because the drinks were pre-poured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Londo's not going to leave that up to chance. But there is that little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah.
So you can go, did he actually?
Maybe.
Is this even a thing?
But he's now made a move to put them in an actual rivalry. Before, it was always undercurrents of there was something between these two guys because they're both power-hungry men in the court, and somebody's going to have to go against somebody sooner rather than later.
Londo's trying to take those reins back off Reefer and steer the Republic back to being on the straight and narrow rather than fighting on like these 16 different fronts.
And when we think about that whole thing, when they're fighting on all these different fronts and it makes no sense, it actually makes sense when we know what the shadows are and why they force people to do these things that they're making them do.
Has been ramping up to that as well because we've been hearing more and more about the different Centauri wars that are happening, like mainly with the Drazi, because we got the ambassador of the Drazi having a meeting with Londo in one of the previous episodes and yelling at him, and Londo just threatens mediation. Him. And but yeah, there's the rivalry is set up between the two in this, and yes, the actions that Reefer's taking makes sense when it comes to the shadows and their ideology. But another aspect that I really like from a character point of view is Reefer has been shown to be cunning, to be brilliant, to be ruthless, but he's not smart. He doesn't come first. He's not smart. No. He's not a forward thinker. He's really great at seeing what's happening in the now and striking upon that rather than seeing the bigger picture. And I like that about Reefer as an antagonist because it's not saying he's a dumb villain, but it's also not saying that he has his blind spot. Yes, he has foibles and weaknesses that will bite him in the arse. What do you think about all of this stuff, Adam? And what do you think about Reefer in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's not as smart as Londo in this sense because he doesn't realize the threat that the shadows represent. To him, they're a tool. I can afford to fight on multiple fronts because I know the shadows have got my back. What he hasn't realized yet, which is what Londo has realized, is that eventually the shadows are going to come for the Centauri as well. And that's why he's tried to put that distance between them. And Reefer just kind of seems to be blind to that danger, I think.
Yeah, because
he thinks he knows best.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even just if the shadows turn against the Centauri, it's if the shadows fall, those people with them will go down as well, and we are with them, and we should not be with them. We need to be on our own destiny. And also, a thing that I really like about Londo as a character is he really thinks, even though he's benefited from the help of others, he thinks that he and the Centauri can do it on their own. We don't need the help of others to forge our destiny, to forge our great empire. We don't need the support of others. And Londo goes to like that on a character level. I don't need Via's help. I don't need Sheridan's help. But we're proven time and time again that you actually do. Help. I don't need Delen's patronizing help to save my soul. I can do it on my own. And you expand that out to he thinks that of the Centauri as well. So this move here from a character standpoint for Londo makes complete sense. But it is directly opposed to Reefer, who doesn't see why this is a problem. He's like, why wouldn't I use these godlike beings to achieve the goals that I want? That makes sense. And this scene here really helps bolster up one of the great episodes later in this season, which is "And the Rock Cried Out, No Hiding Place," because that is when Reefer and Londo go to town on one another. But also, if we didn't have the poisoning scene here, we wouldn't have all the stuff with Adira as well later this season. A lot of times when Londo gets to be the bad boy in a way that's really cool to watch as a viewer, it is often later something that will punish him.
Yeah.
This is an awesome moment. As a viewer, you're sitting there pumping your fist going, yeah, Londo. Yeah, I'm loving you doing this nefarious political Game of Thrones House of Cards stuff. This is so awesome. And then within this season, it is used against him.
Because Londo destroys himself.
Mm.
Even when he doesn't realize that he's doing it, when he thinks that he is taking control back, it's just a weird step towards his demise.
You walked away from the greatest power I have ever seen, and now you expect me to do the same? They are the key to my eventual rise to the throne. Why would I abandon them?
Because I have asked you. And because your loyalty to our people should be greater than your ambition. And because I have poisoned your drink.
What did we think of... This is a very weird little plot line that's shoved in this episode, but it is one that
Harlan Ellison?
Harlan Ellison is the voice of the backup AI program that they tried to put on Babylon 5, but it didn't work. What did we think of this overall? Because it's very, very minor, but it brings a smile to my face. What did you think of it, Adam?
Yeah, I don't really connect with this kind of humour all that well, so I didn't really find it funny as such. But I did think it was cool that they brought Harlan Ellison to do that voice. You know, it was such a distinct personality that they created. They definitely needed to address the whole thing of we've got to reset these command codes. Although I think it was way easier than it should have been.
Well, yeah, Garibaldi already knew it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Another thing
I've done this before.
Yeah. They're sitting there together saying their passwords out loud, which I think is a really kind of weird quirk of in sci-fi TV. You often interact with your computer verbally, and there's a reason. Present day, when we type in a password, it doesn't display on screen. And if Honor actually hears him and then reacts to his choice of password.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty weird.
And Delenn almost walks in on this.
Yeah, Delenn almost walks in on this, but I think they could trust Delenn at this point. No, but I agree with you. There's humor here that isn't my cup of tea, but it's one where if it was in it more, I would like it. That's how I would describe it. Like, if this was a bigger thread in an episode where the backup computer comes alive and it's sassy and they have to deal with it as it's causing problems and it's just sassing them off and it is crazy. Like, I always forget that as you go further in, it is just speaking nonsense.
Your
like
mother and I.
I always forget that. I always think of it as like it's a normal computer that just has like it has an attitude. But no, he does just ramble about absolute nonsense as it goes along. And maybe this is the Red Dwarf fan in me, where I love Red Dwarf, and Red Dwarf has Holly, who's the computer that has a personality that cracks jokes and is a bit has a bit of a loose screw in them, and they're a bit senile, and that's fun. But this needs to be more, because as it is always something where I look back on Babylon 5 and go, well, that was a nice little idea, and that's all I think.
It's like, why did it make it through everything? Like, other than it's an idea for Harlan.
Yeah, it's something for Harlan to do.
Like,
and
that feels like that is the sole reason why this got through all of like the drafts and into production.
What really comes across to me is, and I'm curious to hear from a sci-fi author, it just feels like JMS was reading iRobot at the time and he thought I could just chuck a couple things in, because it comes across like in the third season in particular, JMS was watching and or consuming some sci-fi things and he just threw them in every now and then, like Exogenesis. He watched Blade Runner recently and just chucked it in. And this has some of that iRobot humor. It's like, oh, we have a little robot program that's gone a little bit amok. Like this one's gained a sense of humor, so it's just transported our people across the universe for fun. And this comes across as something that is inspired by things of that nature, but not to the point in which they make it anything more other than what a neat idea that is.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right. I hadn't thought of it in terms of connections to something like iRobot, but yeah, it's quite possible.
Because this is a series made by a nerd who loves bringing in all the influences. One of the main villains is called Alfred Bester.
Yeah. After
all, so it is something. I will say, to cap this off, it was brilliant to pair up this annoying AI with Garibaldi, though. That is the dream team to have this. And if they do make a reboot, I want a whole episode of this. I don't want this to be a D plot in the story.
Nobody's ever complained before, but I guess some people just aren't happy unless they're messing it up for everyone else. You know, you really should stand up straight. Your mother and I have been worried about this for years. We've been trying to talk to you about it, but...
The Night Watch remnants are still on the station and they're up to some trouble. What did you think of this?
I didn't like it as much on this rewatch. Because I'm like, oh, okay, we're doing this. Because, like, it just falls a bit flat for me. Because I'm like, yeah, Delenn is in no danger.
Yeah.
They might kill the captain, but who knows? I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, this is happening. And I think it sort of put me off, particularly this rewatch, with the sort of fake out of the target is Sheridan.
Mm-hmm.
And then, no, it's not.
It's actually Delenn.
Yeah.
The sniper guy was just aiming at Sheridan because he wants to, but he's not allowed. So you were underwhelmed by this.
Yeah.
Is it underwhelming in terms of it on its own, or is it because it's followed up the three big ones? Because to me, I think I'm a little underwhelmed because we had the three big ones.
Like it's always a context thing as well, but just the way that it's weaved into this episode because it is so busy. There's like, I don't have time to be scared for Delenn. We're moving on. I'm much more enjoying the stuff with Marcus.
Mm-hmm. Of course you are. Of course you are. I don't know. I've always thought of this as a lesser plot than it should be, and I think it is. Like, when you hear the premise that the station has to deal with remaining Night Watch members that have not been caught, and they're gathering their forces, and they kidnap Delenn, and they have a whole plan, that sounds like it's going to be far more dramatically impactful than it is when I actually sit down and watch it. But to give it some praise, I actually really liked, because the thing I did forget was their plan. I really liked their plan. When Boggs lays down what they're going to do and why they're going to do it, it made sense, but it was in a manner where I did not think that they would take that route initially. And when they went through it about how Delenn has gathered these forces because of her sheer cult of personality and sheer force of personality, and if we take that away, the ships will go away, and then Sheridan will be easier pickings. It really was neat to me that the Night Watch, who are observant, because that's their role, that was their role, they were everywhere, there were eyes everywhere, were observant to that as well. Because that was something we, the audience, were observant to, but the episode previously didn't even state that. It was that Delenn just walked into the Grey Council, broke it apart, and then took all of these forces with her without any actual power backing her up, just because of her sheer force of cult of personality and prophecies and stuff.
It's calling her out a little bit for that.
It's calling her out, but it's not just doing that. It's showing us that the antagonists, whether they be the Minbari later with Naroon or the humans, see it as well. And that is good to have because it adds layers of realism to the world, because surely somebody would think of this, and somebody did. So I like the Night Watch plot in terms of the actual plot that they had. I think there's a lot that you can play around with there, but I think
the execution of it? It
gets lost in the cracks of all of these other things happening in the episode, and to my eyes, the portrayals in the writing and in minor part the acting as well of the remaining Night Watch people are a little too cartoony. As soon as we get to ominous singing and the foot bones connected to the ankle bone, all of that, you're losing me, because at least in the other 3 episodes when we had Vaughn Armstrong as the security guy who said, does it make you feel like God? He was creepy in a way that felt more real.
It was unsettling, whereas this like, we have a crazy dude, great.
Very much how do we as a TV show demonstrate that we have crazy people? Here's how we do it. And that is how I come at it. What about you, Adam? What did you think of this main thrust of the episode with the remaining Night Watch on the station?
For me, this was the weakest part of the episode. I think the main reason that this was here is because of the idea that you need to have a threat in the story to maintain tension. But I think this could have actually just worked as a character piece, and that would have been fine. But yeah, there is some interesting stuff in it. The thing that really struck me, as kind of has already been mentioned, is this seems like a very different Night Watch. I actually said that this feels like the dregs of Night Watch. In terms of how they behave, how they're portrayed, totally agree, kind of cartoony cliche. But I found a really interesting quote from JMS on the Lurker's Guide about this. He said, "I went just a little here for a kind of metaphorical approach. Prior to this, Night Watch folks have always been presented as starched, scrubbed, visually appealing, the face they wanted others to see. Now we see their true face, the scarred, dark, empty eyes no longer pretending to hide. So we kind of cast in that direction." And I thought that helped to explain what to me was just this really different Night Watch. I'm like, who are these guys? These are not the same Night Watch we've been dealing with the last few episodes.
Yeah, like they feel more like they belong with that
Home Guard.
No, not this. Like, not that's not where I was going, but yeah, I see that. The various dudes that have tried to fill the power vacuum of Nagrath, of like
many criminals of Babylon 5, like the many thugs of Babylon 5.
Everything goes through me. Dudes that we've seen.
I think there is something that you could do well when it comes to what JMS said on that Lurker's Guide, because I also thought that where the Night Watch that we see here are the brutes. They aren't these elegant villains or these high-ranking security guys or anything fancy. We mentioned Home Guard. I imagine people that were Home Guard people just easily got swept into the Night Watch because it was such an umbrella thing that you could easily have that. So people like Boggs and the Sniper, they make sense as people who would be in the Night Watch, and they make sense as the remaining cockroaches that Babylon 5 has to deal with, but they just aren't that compelling in this.
No.
They aren't that compelling to watch. They aren't that compelling to see,
sense,
talk.
but I just don't care.
I wish they were scarier. That's it. Like, you can keep them with their plan. Just make them actually intimidating. Home Guard was more intimidating than this. The first time we met Home Guard, they stabbed a woman and branded her. That was intimidating. That set the tone. Here, we just don't have that. What we have is a guy with a scar on his eye telling us ominous things, and that isn't enough. We need to see them do more. And even then, they do bad stuff here, like they shoot a Mbryo and they show it off camera, of course, but they are very much a cartoonish representation to a degree that isn't enjoyable to watch. Because there's something like, sometimes Babylon 5 can have really cartoony, villainous characters that are fun to watch. And you see them and you go, oh, I know what they're going to do, but hey, there's a campy quality to it. Oh, it's 90s sci-fi. I'm in the zone here. Here, this is very much, it's just a bunch of dirty guys in a room mean mugging to the camera, and that's what we got for the episode.
There's a weird point that I want to bring up, because this kind of reflected a lot of other problems that I had with this sort of section of the plot, which is that there's the moment where Delenn is having that conversation and the crazy guy really wants to kill her.
The sniper, yeah.
Yeah. And Boggs comes in from where, for what reason, don't know, to tell him off and then goes back out.
Yeah, he just leaves him.
He just comes in to say his lines and then leaves the room.
You know what that is? TV.
Yep.
That's just TV nonsense. Where did he go? Why did he leave him there? Why?
Why would you leave that man alone with the hostages?
Well, the bigger one in that scene, Rachel, is the Mbryo captain says in Mbryo that he's loosening his restraints, and then the guy says, better tighten them. He tightens Delenn's.
Yes!
And then leaves him, and then the guy gets free and attacks him, and that's why they have that altercation, then hence Boggs comes in. TV shit. It's like, we need that to happen somehow, and yet it inadvertently makes the characters look dumber than they would actually be, because that scene is trying to have it two ways. It's trying to say he's dumb because look what happened. He's dumb and reckless, but also saying he's smart, this sniper. He understands the Mbryo language. He sees through what they're trying to get up to, and he's going to stop them, and he's this psycho who has tortured these Mbryo prisoners of war in the past, and he's dangerous. You need to have it one way or the other. You need him to be that totally bigoted, unhinged, violent, aggressive guy who is dumb, or you need him to be far more cunning and smart and psychotic in a way that is scary. But they're trying to have it both ways here, and in the end, all I remember is this is an episode that is really well defined by the Mitchell and Webb, are we the baddies? Because I don't know how you Night Watch people can sit there as the guy sings the whole foot bone connected to the ankle bone thing and not think to yourself, are we the baddies? Are we the baddies?
Toe bones connected to the foot bone. Foot bones connected to the ankle bone. The ankle bone's connected to the leg bone. Leg bone's connected to the hip bone. Now hear the word of the Lord.
Are we the baddies?
And this is, as you say, the weaker part of the episode, because all of these other things, even if they're small, like the Londo stuff, is so much better because you're spending them with characters you know and like. Or characters you are beginning to like, which is how I feel about Marcus in this episode. I loved him in this episode, unabashedly. On this rewatch, he's been annoying to me in parts, like how he was in my first watching. I liked him a little bit in Messages from Earth, but here I unabashedly liked him. I thought he was great. I really enjoyed his presence, what he had to offer here, his motivations as a character, why he acts the way he does. All of that was spectacular here. That was the thing that I really took away on this rewatch is, this is the episode where I like Marcus as a character unflinchingly. There's no reservations about it. There's no holding back. He's great. Jason Carter is magnificent in this episode. He is both humorous and tragic in ways that are very good to watch.
He delivers some very cheesy lines, very JMS lines very well.
Oh, yeah, but they are catered to his line deliveries more. Like, in previous episodes, he came across as an American writing a British person, way too much with him quoting Shakespeare and, Christmas Carol references, all this stuff. Here, the way he would quip felt far more like an actual British person in TV shows, like the little thing about his fears, like, well, spiders. Well, I must have slept through. The way Jason Carter delivered those lines and the way the lines were written for him felt far more natural as the sci-fi British quipster than we've had in the previous runs of this.
Yeah.
I mean, Rachel, you're in love with Marcus. You love him. Unabashedly so. You are horny for Marcus. That's a fact of the podcast. How did you feel about him in this?
I loved it. Getting to see him kick ass and care about people and be vulnerable by being violent.
He no longer has any repressed anger issues now.
It's not repressed anymore. He still clearly has anger issues. It's just not repressed. It's very much open.
You were in love with him from the drop, the
Yeah.
Marcus character, but is this a turning point for you at all, or is this just further validation of why you like the character? Because this was a turning point for me.
It's further validation, and I'm like, oh, poor Marcus.
Poor Marcus.
Poor Marcus. And I particularly latched on to there was a woman that I was very fond of line, because knowing where that goes, and I'm like, oh, you sweetie, sweetie.
That little sweetie pie Marcus. Yeah, I've found him annoying. On purpose he's annoying, but here even his tiresome aspects are played down a lot more. I think JMS is very guilty, and he admits so, of not knowing when to make the characters shut up. Because he likes writing them. They're very fun to write. Like, Londo's fun to write. Jakar is fun to write. Marcus would be fun to write. But he sometimes lets them dribble on too much. And Marcus has been, for me at least, very guilty of that.
He just keeps on talking.
Here, a lot of times, even though he has a lot of things to say, a lot of the things that really moved me were the silences. They were the quiet moments. They were the moments of looking at another character going through something and him just reflecting on that rather than him having to say a funny line. But I'm curious to hear what our guest has thought about Marcus and about them in this one. What do you think? What's your viewpoint on our Ranger boy?
Yeah, I'm a Marcus fan. Never really found him particularly annoying, but totally agree that this episode, this is Marcus at his best, and he had a surprising amount of humor in this one. And this is more my kind of humor, the humor that comes naturally out of a character of who they are. So I found myself laughing out loud quite a lot through this one, and I think this is my favorite aspect of this episode actually. But also having those deep character moments where he really opens up to Delenn and we see some of his past of where he's come from and how he joined the Rangers for the wrong reason and how we know where that's kind of going to end with his character arc. And then his interactions with Lanier later on. I love that stuff.
Yeah. The motivations for why he's a Ranger are very... They're sad. They're obviously sad in terms of he's lost all of these people, but as you say, he's joined them for the wrong reasons. And since this is the introductory stage of the show, when it comes to his character, we're still getting used to his character existing in the main cast of people when we're watching it for that first time. We just look at that and go, oh, okay, it's a tragic backstory for the character that emboldened them to become the hero we know and we'll see continue on. But when you're looking at it again and you're looking at it today, it just is an underlining, no, that's a worrisome thing. That's a troublesome thing why he's joined the Rangers, because it will just further add to the fire that is the character conflict within him that we'll see burn throughout the rest of his time in the show. Even though he's a fun character, he's likable, he's charming, he's somebody that you can admire in a lot of ways, there are those negative tendencies to his character, including the reason he's joined up to the Rangers, that we'll see gnaw away at him as it goes along as well. Even though he keeps up that very British demeanor of, no, everything's all right, I'm good, I'm just throwing a little quip here, don't look at me being all emotional in the corner. And yet he's the guy that isn't afraid to turn around and give therapy sessions to other characters in a way to kind of deflect away from himself. This is far more of a better defined character than just the handsome guy with the long hair and the staff that says funny things. But you're right, he's very funny in this. What was a personal standout moment for you of humor in this one?
There were a few when he was wanting to interrogate the syndicate, and how he sits down with so much bravado, which is well earned because he knows he's in control and he knows he can take these guys. Probably the best moment was when he knocks the last guy out and then he goes, oh, bugger, now I've got to wait for one of them to wake up.
I do like that bugger makes it into the future. What was a moment for you, Rachel? I mean, you find Marcus very charming and funny. Was there a standout moment of humor?
Oh, I really like the spiders line, obviously. And the other one that really sticks out so much that I believe it's in like the quote section of this episode on IMDb is of like, always said you can get more from somebody with a 2x4 and a kind word than just a kind word.
Yeah, that was I enjoyed that a lot as well. I also had a good giggle at when he sat down with the syndicate and he was laying out what they're going to do and what's going to happen, and I got laughter out of their reactions, especially that guy with the big beard, the big gingery beard balded guy, how he smacks him on the shoulders like, oh, that's very funny. And they all stand up, and just the look on Jason Carter's face when they do that of just, oh, well, they've made their decision.
Yeah,
and they've made their decision.
I don't know, I guess it's a sore irony of sorts, because he's just like, I'll be the last person standing, and he's the last person sitting.
His backstory, how he lost all of these people, is good, but what makes it even better is what Delenn gleams from it, that it's not the tragedy of those people lost. That's obviously a part of it, but it is how he shackles that to himself and drags it behind him.
That's what you need to give up. That's your sacrifice. You need to sacrifice your survivor's guilt.
The guilt and the anger and the problems you have for the fact that you are alive, which it is. Looking at B5 through the lens that we have, it is rather intriguing how many characters do have that survivor's guilt. We had Sinclair with that. Even to a minor extent, Ivanova as well, where Ivanova has, she's the only one left in her family, and she feels very complicated about that. We have a few characters that are carrying that burden with them, and it is a burden that I haven't thought about a lot in media, usually, and when it hits, it really hits. When she says that to Marcus about how he is holding on to the fact that he's still alive, and the look on his face really gets me in the heart, because it is a type of mental trauma that I'm not familiar with personally, but it is one that I am drawn to when it is told in stories, because it isn't one that I see told all that often, and all that often in a way where the character that we're following is still this sociable, confident, happy-go-lucky, heroic person. Usually when I think of this survivor's guilt, it's usually far more in a tragic war story. I'm a soldier with PTSD type of deal, far more played in a more hard-lined, dramatic sense. Not saying that isn't the case with our characters in this, but I really like how Babylon 5 can balance it out where we have characters with severe trauma, but they're also still very competent as people and can still function and manage what they do, but they also need to deal with their problems as well. They aren't solely defined by their problems. Like, I think for many people, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this, Rachel, being the big Marcus fan, I wouldn't define Marcus from his tragedies.
No.
I think I define him as that character who's the romantic, who's the action guy, the funny guy, the British guy, all of that is what I would define him as, but it would be wrong not to bring up.
No, it is a part of who he is. It's not who he is.
You have let go of the people, the places, the things, but you have not let go of the pain. You have not forgiven yourself.
For what?
Being alive.
Oh, Marcus and Linnea.
Simply Linnea.
Okay, I mean, where do we even begin with Linnea? Where do we begin? Okay. We've got a guest here. I'm curious to hear from my guest. What are your thoughts on lovelorn good guy Linnea? What do you think?
I think this episode is a big turning point for Linnea, and particularly in his relationship with Delenn. We've seen his devotion to her in the past, and it's always come across as a very positive thing. I'm blanking on exactly which episode it was, but when he accompanied Delenn back to Mbryo when she was called before the Great Council, basically so that they could kick her out, and he kind of was there, and she said, you didn't have to come with me, and he's like, oh, I'll follow you anywhere. That felt very positive, and we loved him for that. It was like, yeah, what a great friend Linnea is. Wouldn't it be great if we could all have a friend like him and be a friend like him?
Mm-hmm.
This episode is where we start to see that there is an aspect of unhealthiness to that relationship. And I think it started off in a very genuine place.
Mm.
I think he was being a good friend, and he did want to be a good friend. But as his feelings are growing and more, he couldn't even look her in the eye to start with. Now he looks into the eye and he's kind of smitten. And as much as he tells Marcus, this is not a romantic love, this is a higher form of love. I think we can see that he's kind of deluding himself a little bit there.
Mm.
And he says he knows that she's destined for another. I mean, this is also the episode where John and Delenn officially become a couple, I guess.
Yeah.
And kind of that's the point where he really, I guess, needs to let that go. And then later when they get married, that's definitely the point where he just needs to let that go, but he never does. He still holds on to it. And what's really interesting to me, as we've been talking about Marcus, is that he follows a very similar path. He enters the Rangers for the wrong reasons, just like Marcus did, and they both come to kind of tragic ends. Although Marcus while tragic, was much more a very deliberate act of self-sacrifice. Linnea just gets on this really self-destructive path. And as much as people say that kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, you look at this episode and JMS has been planting seeds for that the whole way through.
Yeah. And even in previous ones, it's been played for comedy, and you didn't realize, such as when he had to make that dinner for Sheridan and Delenn, and he had to stay up, and the look of anger upon his face when Sheridan's like snoring his way through it, and he speaks smack about him in Minbari. We don't even get subtitles for it, but you know that him and Delenn are having a back and forth about it when he leaves, and you know that there's been even some minor tensions there. And you're right. I think a lot of fans come across this as something that is later in the season comes to a head, and they look at it as something that came out of the blue. And I have felt that way. And many people I know feel that way. My sister feels that way. Rachel, you felt that way. And so whenever I rewatch the show, I always go, I'm going to try and remember this about Linnea. I'm going to try and really focus this in on Linnea. But in a way, I keep losing the focus because there's so many other things to look at. So it always kind of creeps up on me anyway, even with an episode like this, and I know it's there. a part of me just goes, I don't want that though. That's how I come across it. Like that is the thing I wanted to ask you, Rachel, is what Adam went through is very nuanced and it is what the series goes through, but is it an addition to the character of Linnea that you as an individual viewer want?
Here's where I'm at with it. I think this was something that JMS had the idea for, but the performance and the execution of the show moved away from that idea.
Evolved from it.
It evolved away from it. So there's this divergence of what we see and how we feel about Linnea and what's written down in the show Bible. And it's when it goes back to those things that Linnea was originally meant to be. So they're seated there, they make sense, but they don't feel right.
Is it just... Was that, sorry?
I think that's fair.
Yeah. A part of my viewership of this is twofold. One, I think this is aged in a really interesting fashion. We talk a lot nowadays when in
the friend zone.
The friend zone, but we've evolved beyond being the friend zone or the cock block. People very much are aware of good guys and simps and cucks and all of that. And I don't mean to say those in a very flippant way. Like, that is a thing that we have become hyper aware of those type of people and how we can characterize them or how they are characterized. And we see that be something brought into TV shows and movies a lot more. These type of characters are defined in a certain way a lot more. And so a part of my struggle with this over the years was when I was younger, I didn't understand what this was. Like, I just didn't know that this was a type of person or a type of being, a type of man, a type of friend or so on, that I just didn't grasp at that when I was younger. And now that we've gotten older and that this is something that's been brought into the light a lot more, I look at it today and I go, this has aged really well. This has aged really, really well. The other thing, a part of my twofold issues that I've had is, damn it, I just liked when we had a nice thing. I liked having a good friend Linnea. That's just as simple as that. Like, we can talk and stroke our chins about, like, dramatic stuff and, seeding of this and seeding of that and threading through the needle and all of that. And I'm not saying that JMS doesn't earn where he goes, and I'm sure when we get to season 5, we'll see how we feel about it. But as an individual viewer, I liked the thing we had. And I don't like the thing we have now. And I'm having to grapple with on this watch if that me as a viewer of saying I don't like that is having to separate of my personal preference and the quality. Because I think many reviewers, many critics, many viewers as well, when they don't like something, they think that means it's a bad thing. And I reject that. Like, when people say, I don't like Franklin because he does bad things, I don't think that means that Franklin's a bad character. I think it means that Franklin has bad qualities as a person that is explored in the series. Linnea, this is a bad thing about him. I do not like it, but I don't think that means that it is bad writing.
No.
I don't know. I'm still left uneasy about how I feel about it, but this is an aspect that on my rewatch, I'm always excited to see how I feel about it because I haven't really landed on a firm decision of if I like it or not.
Each rewatch, my feelings about this part of Linnea's journey is different. And that does speak to the quality of the show, that the same thing can feel different each time, and you're never quite firm in your convictions about it.
Yeah. Rachel, this episode fed you a lot. It gave you Marcus, it gave you some Londo, it gave you even some Reefer, but you're hungry for some romance, some tender love, some gazing at one another in each other's eyes and smiling and saying, I love you, without actually saying, I love you. You got everything you wanted in this, huh? Sheridan and Delen's relationship is officially a go.
It's confirmed.
It's confirmed. We locked it in. Do you want to talk us through Sheridan and his feelings and actions for Delen in this?
He beats the fuck out of the guy. It's great. With his bare hands. Oh, the choreography for that scene.
It was good. That was a good fight scene.
Yeah. It just had that very classic, if now you punch me and then I punch you.
Mm-hmm.
But like the way that the performance comes through.
The weight of his punches.
Yes. I'm like, it feels like you're actually hitting this dude. And after like recently watching some things where it's like, oh, yeah, you clap that thigh.
Oh, I liked his speech that he gave when he was beating up that guy about how I don't want any more of you. I'm sick of this. He's just so over it. But it's a build-up of not just his annoyance and frustrations with the Earth conflict, but the fact that this freak has just thrown a knife at the woman that he's falling in love with. That's where the emotions are coming from as well. Mainly, like that is, I'm sick of you people. I'm not wanting to deal with this anymore. Like I've drawn the line in the sand already by separating away from Earth, but now you people are attacking people I care about. I've had enough. Angry Sheridan is very good.
Yeah.
Angry Sheridan is good, but romantic and in love Sheridan is where you like to be. Isn't that right, Rachel?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're looking at this again, but do you remember what you were like when you saw this episode when it comes to the lens of their romance?
I lost my fucking mind because they come so close and they go so far, but they don't just say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, just say that you love each other, please, for the sake of me. Just do it. Don't make me wait any longer, please.
But Rachel, last episode, he kissed her hand and said they're partners.
Yeah, and, in Confessions and Lamentations, they start calling each other by their first names. Great.
We've made so much progress. He held her hand, gave up his uniform.
Yes, we've come so far, but we have so much more to do. And I just keep on remembering when they finally get to fuck, and it's just so far away.
I mean, you are, as a viewer of television, you watch a lot of shows that do the slow burn romances.
Yes, but I'm also very impatient.
You are impatient, but I wanted to know, since I am not a big viewer of these and a consumer of these, what makes this work and not make this frustrating and just delaying it for the sake of delaying it? Because you have watched so many shows where that is the case. You brought up, I think, Chesapeake Shores or something in a recent discussion where you're like, they're separating them off just so that they can get together at the end of the show because that's just how shows work.
Yeah, because they're the end pairing.
They're the end pairing. So how does B5 for you manage to make it work and not make it just blue balls for the sake of blue balls?
Well, I think it helps that it's a small part of the story. Like in Chesapeake Shores and other shows like it,
Grey's Anatomy,
the romance is the main plot. Like it is about the interpersonal dramas of people. But with John and Delenn, it feels right. And it's just like, yes, these people would do this in this way. It feels like a very Mbryo courtship in Like, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
It also feels very true to his character.
Yeah, because he wasn't ready to move on. And he's not ready to open himself up to being as vulnerable as being in love is for a person.
Mm. Mm.
It's just, like, it's there when it makes sense and not to just add more drama or to punch up a scene.
From my end of it, what makes it work throughout all of it, not just the chemistry of the actors, because that is important, but when we talk about this series and the person who created it, I think a recurring motif or discussion point we have is cynicism. Like, or a very clear-eyed, stark look at the world. Unflinching is how I would describe. But when it comes to these sides of being a human, such as love and romance, JMS is really good at making the whirlwind of it all very watchable and aspirational and cute. I often think of B5 as that show where it's like fascism is on the rise, and like we have an episode like Confessions and Lamentations where a whole species dies and nobody learns a thing and Franklin's embittered by it. But what makes the series so much more dynamic and fluid and multi-layered is this type of thing where we have this slow burn romance, and it is written by somebody who, although they have these things that they're interested in, such as politics and war and empires and history and ideologies, they're also clearly somebody who is deeply interested in love.
Yeah, because it's also a part of what is it to be human.
But they, as a person, know how to write what love feels like, because that is what pushes me over. Is this feels real?
Yeah.
The little quiet moments, the little the teetering of holding a hand, and there's obviously a heightened aspect to it. But
the chaste, slow romance. It's not falling in love,
and it isn't coming from a cynical place. Star Trek Discovery, Ash Tyler and Michael Burnham also had a slow burn chaste love, but it was from a cynical place as writers. I didn't feel like it was real. So when we come to this, I've been here for a season and a bit, feeling the love between these two people because of the actors, but also because the writer involved is actually fascinated with love. They are a romantic at heart, and I think that is what really seals the deal. But also, this is a key aspect of the series. Their love is very much a core of Babylon 5. Adam, what do you think about Delenn and Sheridan's romance and how it blossoms here?
Yeah, I like it. I think what it really appeals to me about it is just the sweetness of it all. And like, I've never been much of a fan of the whole romance of the week type deal that so many shows do. So, and that was definitely the norm when this was being made. Just to see this happen so slowly and so naturally, and yeah, I don't know if I can define it, but I just liked the sweetness of it.
I know that Delenn is fated for another, and I've accepted that in my heart. But I have vowed to stay at her side through all things for as long as I live.
That's a dangerous promise, Linnea.
We have the ceremony itself where all of the human crew come in, they relinquish their uniforms and tell harboring a secret about themselves. And do you want to walk us through this, Adam? Do you want to talk us through each of the people and what they have going on and your reactions to it, and we can all bounce off of it?
Well, I suppose John was first, which we've pretty much talked about.
Yeah.
Then Garibaldi was next.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "I'm afraid all the time what I might do if I ever let go." And I've spent a lot of time wondering what he means by that. Is this a reference to his alcoholism, or is it a more general statement? I've never quite figured it out.
For me, it is a part of his alcoholism, but I think it's a reflection of the fear that's underneath the addiction for him. Because if he lets up and lets go, he's terrified of what he's capable of. And that includes falling back into his addiction. But also, I feel like his coping mechanism of alcohol is also trying to address that fear of, what do I do? Who am I? What am I capable of? And what does this mean?
I look at it as his fear of letting go as well ties into his alcoholism, but I look at it a lot about he is a person that is always struggling to keep it together. Not just because of his alcoholism, but he's struggling to be the good chief of security, struggling to be the strong guy, but to keep himself in check. And whenever I look at this, I think about how we've seen that throughout the series where Garibaldi, he has issues of trust. He has issues of being able to believe in things. He's an agnostic after all. And I think about how this statement is really influenced when we think about him in season 4, when we see him not in control. We see all of his inhibitions turned up to 11, and his ability to regulate himself is removed. And what he becomes the worst version of himself. Now, he didn't get to decide that. That was forced upon him. But it is a worry that he's had of, what if I let go of it all? What if I let go of not drinking? What if I let go of my anger? What if I let go of, like, if he just loses control? He's a guy that's all about control. Even in this episode, right, where we offhandedly said, like, he solves the computer thing very easily. But a part of it is he already had it under control because that's his job. That's who he is. He needs to know the codes.
He was prepared for this eventuation of things.
Yeah.
Like,
he's a very paranoid man.
Okay. Like, he's always thinking so far ahead in all of these different directions and trying to stay in control even when things haven't happened yet.
And to the point that Adam has made, I've also had that where I didn't necessarily know what he was saying on the literal level of, like, what it connects to in details of his character or story beats we've seen in the show or will see. But I don't know if you feel the same, Adam, but I understood it on that emotional sense. When he said it, I understood what he meant.
Yeah, it's an opening up and being vulnerable, which is something that he doesn't often do.
He's usually the guy, like Marcus, he's usually the guy that allows other people to do that to them. Because he was very much like that with Sinclair, where he would be there so Sinclair could open up. But he is the guy that he doesn't do that all the time, and he usually hides it behind.
He does it with Franklin as well.
Yeah. So who was next to come in?
Next was Ivanova. So she comes in and she reveals that she thinks she loved Talia, which I guess confirms what we kind of already saw in Divided Loyalties, and kind of, I guess, gives some closure to the plot that never was.
You were there when Babylon 5 was coming out, so you most likely would have seen this episode when it came out, correct? You would assume?
Yeah, I would have done.
I mean, this is, what, mid-90s at this point? Is this, 96, I want to say? Maybe 95?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
I mean, what's been your reactions to the Ivanova Talia stuff? Especially, like, if you can recollect into the earlier days when you were watching this, when it comes in with something like that.
There wasn't a lot really to react to, I think, because my biggest feeling was that, like, they set these two up with a bit of an adversarial relationship right at the very beginning, and then you kind of saw the characters together maybe twice after that, and that's all you ever saw. So yeah, it kind of, like, I didn't even realize that they'd started to become friends, especially because I missed a couple of episodes. So yeah, it did feel kind of like coming from nowhere a little bit.
Right. And do you feel the same now, after all of this and with the context that's been provided about what was going on here?
I actually was reminded just recently, watching someone reacting to, I forget the name of the episode, but the one about the telepath railroad, where at the very end, she actually goes to Vonova and says, I was wrong, you were right. And then they sit down and start to talk. And I'd completely forgotten that scene. I don't think I saw that episode in the original run. And I think that does help a little bit.
It is a scene that I remember when I watched it, and at first she said the words, and I didn't believe it, because I also didn't think they did enough between those two characters, but I did feel something going on between them in divided loyalties. Something, but I didn't necessarily know that it may be gay, because it was the 90s and the show hasn't really done that, and it won't really, but kind of, I don't know. And so I didn't give it credit for that. So when she does come around and says, I think I love Talia, I was left a bit like, what? Whoa, Ivanova, come back. Let's keep talking. And then, oh, she's gone. I look at it now and I think it's, I admire it a lot. It's very gutsy to do that. I don't know what the reaction was when it comes to fans at the time, or even just TV network stuff at the time, because this is like in the mid-90s and it's just one of our characters just saying, yeah, I loved another person of the same sex, bye, and just walks off. I don't know what the overall feelings and sentiments were, but looking at it today, you admire it because it was trying to do something that it wasn't able to do in the confines of the time and the actress leaving and the network it was on. But I wish I felt more emotionally for it. The actress, Claudia Christian, does a great job delivering it. But looking at it today, I admire it in terms of what it was trying to do with those two characters, and actually acknowledging it, actually saying it out loud that she thinks she loved her. But I don't have as much of an emotional resonance with it because, again, I also just don't think they did enough with Talia and Ivanova. I always wish they did more with them. What about you, Rachel? This is something that comes in.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's just like, okay, can we stay here? No, we're not staying here, and we're moving on, and we're pretty much never going to touch this again. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye, potential. I salute you.
Did you ever think Talia was coming back?
No, especially after Bester's line about the dissection. I'm like, okay,
possible.
She's dead. She dead.
Adam, did you ever think she was ever going to come back?
No, I didn't. And I think part of it is because the way they brought Lita in to kind of replace her in that same episode. It's like, oh, okay, so yeah. Lita's going to be our telepath now.
That's fine. I like Lita, so it's fine.
I like Lita a lot more too, as a character. There was Talia always came across as very cold and aloof, and I just never quite connected with her as a person the way I do with Lita.
Yeah, I love Lita. That's the slogan I always say when she comes on. I love Lita. I love Lou, and I love Lita.
So we've got Franklin now, and he says, "I have a problem," and this is the one moment where he's at. I mean, we know he's talking about the stims, but he doesn't actually say that. He just says, "I have a problem," and for this moment, he's actually admitting that not only to himself but to someone else, and he's going to deny it again later. But in this one moment with Delenn, he's being completely honest, which is the whole point of this ceremony, I guess, to really open up about something.
In the show, we as the audience know it exists as a thing, but you wonder when you're going through it, does the show care or no? Because sometimes you go through big gaps and you go, oh, does the show remember the thing I remember? And Babylon 5 is very good at remembering. And it's been a while since we've touched Franklin's stims addiction. It's
been a while since we've touched Franklin, it feels like.
Yeah, and him coming in saying, I think I have a problem. And the music, and it's very understated, it's not flashy or over the top, he just says it. carries so much, and it says to you, the audience, that this is a storyline we are going to keep continuing on with. That talk that Garibaldi had with him, it wasn't it, okay? We're going to keep exploring this. And it's, out of all of the confessions, it's the one that just leaves me with a lump in my throat the most, because even though I know how things work out for the character, as you say, it's him finally admitting it to himself and to somebody else, but we know that he's already done this and he will do it again, that he'll slide on that, like he will deny it, he will deflect, he will run away from it for a while. And that cycle is really, really sad to watch, because it is something that we can understand in our real world. Again, bringing it back to Babylon 5 is, yes, a grand sci-fi opera where there's these ancient alien wars, but it is about these human stories, and Franklin's is a very human story. Yes, he's this amazing xenobiologist doctor, and yes, he's addicted to these sci-fi stims, but we understand the cycles of addiction, and this is him going through some of that, and it is just one of those moments. It's a gut punch. It's a bit of a gut punch, and that's this whole sequence is a series of different types of gut punches. You get Sheridan's where it's a nice, sweet, oh, that's cute, and then Garibaldi coming in with something that you go, yeah, I've got that feeling from you. Ivanova just leaving you a gasping, like, whoa, we're actually admitting that, and then Franklin coming in with the knife at the end, being like, I'm still suffering.
And in other shows, all of those sort of revelations and secrets would be whole scenes. But that's not the point of them here.
Yeah.
It really is that moment of reflection from each of these characters and a glimpse into their inner world. And then it moves on.
We get Lanier out there. I always find this, okay, so I always find this cheesy. This episode's cheesy in a lot of ways, where Lanier's just like, Delenn assumed that you would all do this. So she's
already had these made.
How did she get your measurements perfect? I don't know. I did it in your sleep, I guess. I don't know. But we get new uniforms, and I always forget that this is the episode where they get new uniforms as well.
Oh, I don't.
Really?
I don't. Particularly when it opens up, when Sheridan's like, I'm not wearing it. And Ivanova's like, but you're gonna wear it. And he's like, okay, one more time.
Oh, yes, the space funeral scene, that happened. And that was a good scene. It was a nice extension off of the one we saw in Soul Hunter all the way back in season 1. They're bringing it back, and they got better CG and music to accompany it this time as well. But that was a nice tender scene. Tender in terms of like emotionally tender, but like the new uniforms. Adam, fan or not?
Huge fan. I love the black uniforms. I think I've got something about black and grey in sci-fi, because my favourite Star Trek uniforms are the First Contact ones as well, which we used later in DS9. But yeah, these look fantastic, and they're quite meaningful, because if you look at it, Sheridan's uniform has been very symbolic ever since Messages from Earth, where he first had to take it off, and then he felt he couldn't wear it anymore, and now he's kind of gone through this rebirth, and he can't put that Earth-Force uniform back on because he has set aside all of that, but now he gets this unexpected gift of a new beginning, and now he's in the Army of Light, and I really like the symbolism of all of that.
Yeah, and heck, even back earlier, we had I think it was There All the Honor Lies, when Kosh wanted him to see a perfect moment of beauty. One of the things he had to give up was his command pips and bars and all of that. Again, showing that earlier on that this is something we're building towards, where symbolically we're telling you that he will have to strip these things away. And we see that he literally has to strip these things away. He can't put on that uniform. He has these new black uniforms. I have always been mixed on the black uniforms. I think they're really cool. I'll say that. I think they're a cool sci-fi outfit. I personally love the Earth Force outfits because of what they represent in terms of they are these stuffy, military clothes with with all the insignias on it and the big leather thing on the front. I like the functional quality of them looking, but they also look stuffy and annoying to wear, and they don't fit Zach. And no, don't worry, the new ones won't fit Zach either. And I like the iconic look of those Earth Force uniforms. Just like when I visualize the B5 outfits, that's what I go to. But the black ones are fun. Like they're sleek. They look comfy to wear. I love the as you say, like the gray silver on the chest there. I love the collars to them. I love all of that. I also do appreciate that they still incorporate bits of the previous with the command bars and the stuff on the shoulders. And I will say, I think Sheridan's outfit gets even better when he gets his little leathery strap things that he puts over this outfit. Yeah. I love that. I miss that already. I wish that was here.
You can't wait. You can't wait.
This is like the opposite of how I feel about Picard's other uniform in the later seasons, where he gets like the jacket outfit with the middle open and there's some leathery stuff. I hate that. I hate that jacket. Everyone loves that jacket. I don't. This is the opposite, where it's like, man, I wish they already altered him with the little leather strappy things. I love those. I love those so much. Rachel, what about you? This is a new thing. Have you been a fan of the uniforms? They stay around for quite some time.
They do, but I am also, I guess, sort of guilty of when I think of the uniforms, I think of the Earth Force ones.
Yeah.
But I do quite like the new ones. I really like the grey patch being sort of that allusion to the Mbryo Grey Council, as well as the Army of Dark.
It's triangular as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Triluminary.
Illuminati, I tell you.
It doesn't have crystals, though.
What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen someone who's been reborn before?
We have somebody we want to talk about that starred in this episode for our spotlight section of the show, where we talk about an actor or actress that appeared in the episode. We go over what we thought of their performance, their character. We look over them as an actor and a person, if we've seen them in anything before, any interesting trivia or facts. And we're looking at the guy who played Boggs, Rachel. Why did they name him Boggs?
I don't fucking know.
Just makes me think of toilets. See, Adam laughed. He knew. I mean, you've had the same thought, right? He just sounds like a toilet.
Yeah.
He's part of the dregs of humanity.
Yeah, he's a real Boggs. But we're looking at Don Stroud, and he's been in Babylon 5 before. Adam, do you remember who he was?
No, but I did read that he was in TKO.
Oh, how could you forget? Walker Smith's trainer, Caliban. He appeared in like a few scenes. He gave an iconic thumbs up to Garibaldi. He was like the random alien that came up to them and was like, I can teach you the Muay Thai.
I'm going to tell you how to get in when nobody wants you to.
And I'll teach you how to punch. And then we only saw Walker punching on his own and him just standing there going, yeah, that's him. How could you forget that amazing character of Caliban? What a wonderful role. But I didn't mind him in this episode. I thought he was fine as Boggs. He delivered the lines well enough. Him having an actual real life scar and missing eye or like damaged eye is one of those things where they cast him mainly because of that, because it's intimidating. He has a look. He also has a great voice. I really love the way he as an actor moves his mouth when delivering lines or just speaking. He has a really specific way he does it, and his accent really just lends to the seediness of this character. Again, casting is very important when it comes to giving legwork to characters, because on paper, Boggs is nothing. He's got barely anything to him. He's stock standard generic villain man, and they get an actor who I won't say gives the greatest performance I've ever seen, but he elevates it to a level where it's at least fun when he's on screen. Like, I wish there was more of Boggs than the sniper guy.
Yeah. For
my liking. I just think there's something about this actor that just adds something to it all. What do you think, Rachel?
I agree. It's like he does a good job with what he's given and the time that he has. Yeah. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I like what he does. I actually found this whole scar thing really fascinating because I had assumed that the scar was a makeup effect for the episode just to make him look more menacing. And then I read the story, which apparently was told by Larry DiTillio, where that was a real scar, and he actually got it from jumping into a crowd of men with knives to stop a woman from being raped. I'm just like, wow, this guy's like a real-life hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like an assault/attempted like mugging in New York, and he got stabbed, I think it was like 8 or 10 times, including in his eye, so he lost the eye and now it's a fake one, and obviously can't see out of it.
Yeah, and he has a scar, and I assumed that as well, that it was like a makeup thing. And then I remembered one of my watches, I saw that Caliban guy. I'm like, I swear he's been in B5 before. And the trick is he'll be in B5 later. And as Caliban, he has like a weird eye. And it's like, oh, okay, that must be makeup for this alien. But then I see him later as a human. He has a weird eye still. I'm like, oh, that must be a real weird eye of some sort. But I never really looked into the story until sitting down today and having to look over it as well. And he is just a fascinating figure of a real life person. He's had a very long, vast career. And for myself, I haven't seen a lot of the things he's done, but I
know the things that he's done.
I know them, or they're just beyond my age bracket, I will say, or where I am. There's a lot of old American westerns and television shows where he'll play the heavy or the bad guy, or the guy who gets punched, or the guy who is the guy who mugs people. There was even an interview I was watching with him where he talked about how when he got stabbed in his eye and he was left there bleeding, he felt like it was like a movie that he's been in before, where he was the guy that did that to the hero, left them there. And he felt like it was very serendipitous and really made him think about his career and where he is as a person in life. Because one of the things I learned about the Eyes story was it was one of the things that pushed him to become sober, because he himself has had issues with alcohol in his life. And that was one of those hard kicks to the head life events that really pushed him to the straight and narrow. And so I was watching an interview where he was talking about he was like 25 years sober, and that was a huge factor into that. And again, you see this guy, he's a bad guy, he's got this big scar in his eye, and you just assume, oh, well, I've watched TV shows, I've watched movies, I've read books. Scar in the eye, yeah, bad guy. But you look into the real life story of this man and how he got that, and you just can't help but be like, yeah, what a hero, what an interesting person, and it makes you want to know more about who he is. Have you seen him in anything by any chance, Adam, when you're looking over his roster? Anything leap out?
Yeah, when I looked through his IMDb, the thing that jumped out that I had seen was License to Kill, which is a James Bond movie. One that I quite liked. I actually started with the Timothy Dalton James Bond, so I kind of have a bit of an affection for those two films. And he played a character called Heller, who was like a bit of a sidekick to the main villain.
Okay.
So I don't think he had the scar when he did that role.
No, I think the scar came in like the early 90s is the story. So this would have been like a few years before he went on B5. Yeah, because in first season he had the scars, and that was like 93. So it would have just been a little while before, but I noticed that, and I was hoping one of us was a James Bond fan enough to bring it up, because I'm a bit blind on the Bonds. So whenever I see people in Bond, I go, oh, I assume they're this. And with him, I assumed he was a bad guy. Recently in his career, he was in Django Unchained as well. He was in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. And when I read that, because that's like at the top of his IMDb when I'm looking at it, like that's the last role, one of the last roles he did, it filled in everything I needed to know. Which is, it told me this guy must be some actor from the 60s and 70s, because Tarantino cast him in this role, and he likes to cast actors who are small bit parts in TV shows and movies.
Oh, see, for me, it was like the voice, because that iconic line that he has that I love so much, and I fairly recently again went through a phase of listening to the Django soundtrack, and they do that thing of having like clips of dialogue before
the songs.
Scenes, like from the scenes before the songs. Like, you come into Bill Sharp's town and show your ass.
Oh, yeah, that's the line. That's the line. You show your ass.
Why y'all want to come into my town and start trouble? And scare all these nice people? You ain't got nothing better to do than to come into Bill Sharp's town and show your ass.
He was in both versions of Hawaii Five-0, Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman,
Mrs. Columbo.
Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, the
Walker, Texas Ranger.
The new Mike Hammer adventures or whatever. The new Mike Hammer.
Yeah,
he was in
New Gidget.
And film-wise, he was in the Amityville Horror as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a well-regarded movie.
He was in Carnosaur 2.
Oh, yeah.
And Little Bigfoot as well. Like, he's in all of the shit.
All of the shit. And he has a very fascinating career run. So, like, some reason, and I don't know why, I don't know if you found this in your research, but he took a break in the 2000s, just kind of went off the grid acting-wise in films and TV.
In 2005, he decided to retire back to Hawaii, and he started a business with his wife.
Okay, but then in 2012, he's like, I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm back, baby. I'm going to do Tarantino film and stuff like that. I mean, that is something you found in your research is he's from Hawaii originally.
Yeah. So technically his first role was he was a stuntman for, I'm forgetting the actor's name. But like he was just on the beach in Hawaii surfing because at the time he was like in the junior leagues, sort of. Like, he wasn't, because he was like 18, 19. He was the ranked 4th surfer in the world in his division. And they were like, hey, do you know how to surf? And he's like, oh, do I know how to surf? So then he got into it by doing that, and then was like, oh, I'll go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Give this a crack.
I heard that because I watched an interview with him. But what's really bizarre to me is it sounds like here's the story, right? Handsome guy surfing at the beach, person comes up to him and say, hey, do you want to be in movies? And then he is in movies.
Yes.
But what that story doesn't tell you is what at least IMDb goes on. His parents were also in show business.
Yeah.
So, like, that just is coincidental. Like, it's not like he got in show business because his parents were like a dad's famous vaudevillian and his mum was a singer in this group. It is, he was just a guy surfing at the beach and somebody said, do you want to be in movies? And he said, yes. It is just one of those weird things that just is, both of those exist, but they're not in tandem with, like, they're not joined together. It's just like, oh, okay.
That would have helped him maybe get a bit more settled in Los Angeles and in Hollywood when he moved there, because it was a couple of years between like him getting that stuntman job and him getting his first proper acting credit on IMDb.
And yeah, he was a stunt guy. Did a lot of action, did a lot of acting. He
got a really good agent. That's like part of the interview that I watched explained that he was told, like, you want to get a really good agent.
And he went out of his way to do so.
Yeah, he had the same representation as James Dean had before he died.
Okay.
I think that was one of the actors that he mentioned.
He's that guy, right? Where he has all the stories. Oh, I've worked with this actor. I've worked with Kirk Douglas. I've worked with Clint Eastwood. I've worked with Rock Hudson. I've worked with on and on and on and on and on it goes.
We were filming this movie and doing a fuck ton of cocaine and getting drunk at this bar. I worked at what was it? Whiskey a Go-Go, and I was Frank Zappa's bodyguard for ages.
Yeah, and I would dare celebrities to come surfing with me, knowing that they can't. And legend. And to put this into even more of a unique frame, he's still like with us and still like willing to talk and have interviews. Like you were watching one, and it was from earlier this year.
It was April 2022.
And he's still, like, he's quick. He's got all the stories. Like, he can rattle them off. He knows everywhere he went.
He's just wearing this cool, like, geo sort of printed shirt that looks like it's from the 90s. Clearly just in his beach house at Hawaii.
Yeah, and for me, he is memorable, not because of this episode itself, but his physical presence, the way he looks, the scar, the eye, the way he talks. It's just one of those bad guys in B5 where I don't even think they're really that great of a bad guy, but there's something about the actor who is playing them. I remember Boggs. For some reason, yeah. I remember Boggs because the actor just has that look and that voice.
I want to say something else because we've been talking a lot about romance and talking around attractiveness.
Oh, you find him hot?
Boggs was a centerfold.
Oh, in Playboy?
Playgirl.
Oh, Playgirl, sorry.
Playgirl, 10 grand. He got paid in the 70s to be, I think it was in the 70s, to be a centerfold.
Wow. Adam, would you expect Boggs to be a centerfold?
No, that's a surprise.
Ambassador Delenn is walking a tightrope back home. She got those ships here through sheer force of personality. They think that she's the second coming or something. You take that away, and their support will fade. The Mbryo warships will vanish. Our forces can come in and finish the job.
I know this isn't a part of our spotlight, but I did look up Thug number 1, who was the ginger bearded guy that the mutton chopped guy that Marcus beat up, played by Jim Cody Williams. And I will just say this, he's been in a lot. He was in Bill and Ted, for instance, as well. He was one of the cowboys. In fact, he's so iconic that apparently his image is on the back of the Bill and Ted DVD.
Wow.
But his career is, we need a guy with a beard. That's literally his career. Is we need a biker, we need a thug, we need a Santa Claus, we need a dwarf, we need whatever. We need a guy with a big mutton choppy beard. And that's his career. And so he's always had that. And he's been in, if you look him up, he's been in things you've seen. And what you remember is, he's the guy with the beard.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly.
An extra little spotlight bonus for you there, because I needed to look him up because he looked too much like a Lord of the Rings dwarf character in this, and I needed to know who the fuck this guy was. I don't know, Adam, if that guy stood out to you at all, but he stood out to me, and I needed to know more.
He looked very distinctive.
I was very happy when Marcus went back to him as the person who woke up first.
Yeah, well, he was the one he had the most banter with. What do we rate Ceremonies of Light and Dark on our scale of Yum being bad and Yum Yum being good? And again, people, Yum Yum is a line of dialogue from Star Trek Discovery. What an amazing line of dialogue it was. Adam, Yum or Yum Yum for Ceremonies of Light and Dark?
This is a Yum Yum for me.
Yum Yum.
It's a Yum Yum for me as well.
Yum Yum.
And a Yum Yum from me as well.
Yum Yum.
We didn't discuss it, but who had YYE in this episode? Who would have said Yum Yum if this was written by Star Trek Discovery?
Jakar was here for a moment and he bought his YYE.
He bought it with money? He physically paid?
No. He creates that. He weaves that from thin air.
So you're giving it to Jakar?
Yeah.
Wow. I am going to not give it to Jakar. I'm sorry. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough for it. I'm sorry. He was busy.
He's a contender.
He could have been a contender. I have to give it to the sniper. I have to give it to the sniper. He was just so unhinged and crazy, and it would have made no sense and yet make sense for it to come out of his mouth, just like Commander Nandi. Now.
What if he sung instead of like, and now we hear from the Lord,
if
or
he
whatever?
said yum yum. Yeah, if he sang that. Yeah. Now, Adam, you've watched Star Trek Discovery. You know the famous yum yum line.
Mm-hmm.
It impacted your life. It changed you forever. It changed us forever. We all know where we were when Yum Yum happened. So you know the context and the confines we work in when it comes to giving someone YYE, Yum Yum energy. Who to you in this would have said Yum Yum?
I don't think it was Londo. I just picture him sitting there at the table with Reefer. He's just done his spiel about the party in the cardiovascular system, and then he just locks eyes with Reefer and he says, "Yum yum,"
and takes a swig of his unpoisoned drink.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can see that too. You know what? We this is a while where we've had a slew of different options available, and you know what? It's always hard not to say Londo though, because he's so like it's the accent as well. It's the accent. You want to hear Londo. You want to hear him say "Yum yum." I want to hear it. I mean, apparently Peter Jurak's on Cameo, so I can get him to say it if I wanted to.
Oh,
saw that.
Hey, our wedding anniversary is coming up. So.
Oh, Rachel, you're gonna get a pleasant little gift of Peter Jurak saying.
Gonna get or gonna give, or are we both gonna do it separately?
Let's get each other some cameos. You get one of Peter Jurak, and I'll get one of Claudia Christian. She's on there too.
Yeah.
Why isn't Bruce on there? I want a Bruce one. He would be great. I want to hear him say, "Hey guys, it's me, Bruce. Yum yum." But that's all we've got. Let's hear about what Rachel and I will be watching and talking about next time on Babylon 5.
On the next Babylon 5.
So this will be episode 12, Sick Transit Via. Romance is in the air. Sheridan has a dinner date with Delenn, and Via meets his arranged bride, only to discover she isn't all he'd hoped she'd be. Making matters worse, his secret rescue scheme is exposed.
Spoiler DVD description. That's a bit of a surprise in the episode, but okay. Oh, what an episode that is. One of the first episodes, if not the first episode, to have a character's name in the title.
Yeah.
I think the other one that we get that is the Very Long Night of Londo Malaria. I can't remember if there's any other episodes with a character's name in the title. See, that's a Star Trek thing, for sure. Star Trek fucking loved having characters' names in the titles for funny effect. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I'm fine with Q-Who.
A fistful of datas.
A fistful of datas. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with all of those. All the Bashir ones are pretty good as well. But no, Babylon 5 doesn't play around with those as often. So this will be a monumental one because it's all via, baby.
It is all via, and the title is also Latin.
Yeah, so we'll play around with that next time. People, make sure to give Sick Transit Via a watch. In the meantime, you can find us on all of your social media platforms of choice under YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. We're always posting and interacting on there. You'll see Adam interacting with us on the occasion, telling us things and having a joke around and all of that. So come on over to our social medias and follow us. It's all in the description, as well as our email address where you can email us directly at yumyumpod@gmail.com. Now, where can people find you on the internet, Adam? Where can people find the show, find you?
The easiest place to find everything that I'm involved in is just to go to adamdavidcollings.com, and you'll find links to pretty much everything I do. If you're looking for Nerd Heaven specifically, you can go to nerdheaven.podbean.com, or just search wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to see a little bit more about this wonderful Tasmania where I live, you can search for The Collings Show on YouTube.
Yeah, I know that you have a YouTube channel as well where you do video podcasts are like video forms as well. So if people are interested, I'll include all of this in the description, because I highly recommend, if you guys are looking for some sci-fi discussions out there, Nerd Heaven podcast and the stuff that you do is really great. I always think about how when you did Stargate Universe, I always was like, man, that would be such a great show to cover, because I honestly think Stargate Universe in particular is the one that people don't talk about that much, and I always like going back to those shows and being like, how do they hold up to conversation in a modern lens, and also just in an analytical sense? And I think it's fair to say, but you're the Stargate expert out of us here. Stargate Universe was the most loathed show, I would say, for a while there for Stargate. Is that right to say?
Yeah, definitely the most loathed, but also the most divisive. There are people who passionately love it and people who passionately hate it. And I guess one of the things I was wanting to do is let's move beyond that and actually talk about the show.
Right, because that's how I feel about shows like that, where I have a very divided opinion recollection-wise on Stargate Universe, but I haven't revisited it. And if I did revisit it, I would want to revisit it from like looking at it more intensely than I did initially, where I was just watching it week to week, ad breaks in between, being like, oh, here we go. But no, I enjoy your videos and your podcast where you're just going through things. You need to do more Star Trek, though. I'm just telling you that. I missed you kindly telling Star Trek Discovery's writers that they could do better. While I, on the other hand, don't kindly tell them. I brutally tell them that they could do better. But
stop fucking up.
No, but you have a far more pleasant approach to the Star Trek discussions as well. You're far more pleasant. Although both Adam and I, there comes a point where it's like, and they're starting to screw over Saru as a character. That's not great.
No,
how could you do that? He's so good.
Leave him alone.
He's the best character in Discovery. Leave him alone. Stop it. But whatever. We have our Patreon as well if people want to support our show and give us some money. We have a slew of content over there. We are looking at the X-Men.
We're not just asking you to give us money. We give you something in return.
Yeah. We go through the X-Men movies. Once a month, we're watching those X-Men movies. We're coming close to the end. We're getting right up there. We're going to be watching New Mutants at some point. We'll be the only people in the world who's ever watched it and talked about it. Isn't that a feat? But we've talked about Star Trek over there. We've talked about the new Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. We talked about the second season of Picard. Come on over, join the party. You get to be a part of the Discord and talk to all the other Yumlings. Ooh, isn't that
Maybe
fun?
we can give you a little party in your cardiovascular system.
Yes, I like it. You mentioned that Jakar was in the episode, Rachel.
Yes.
He was your Yum energy contender.
Yeah.
But he was too busy to say Yum, and he was too busy to say good eating to you. And what a fool! He knew that we had a guest on the podcast this week, and he didn't have the guts and the time to say good eating to you, Adam. But I'll say it on his behalf. Good eating to you, Adam.
Good eating to you.
Rachel.
Good eating to you both.
And good eating to you, Rachel.
Mr. Cannonball Day.